Hello and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Evan Decker, and joining me, proud that aliens exist, give it up for C. John Sarowick.
I'm not proud that aliens exist. I'm proud of Tom DeLonge for warning us all.
I'm proud of Lego Rock Band for continuing to keep that song culturally relevant. Because, is it off the one with the cow on the cover? Dude Ranch?
Dude Ranch, Aliens Exist is on Dude Ranch, yes.
Yeah. I remember the cover of that album and pretty much nothing else.
Yeah. What's My Age Again was on that one, right?
No, What's My Age Again is off of Enema of the State.
Oh, they're both off Enema then. They have like a bunch of their hits off
Enema is basically that album from Blink-182 that everyone knows. It's their stunt to use Bare Naked Ladies as a one-to-one comparison, which kind of works in a really sick, sad way.
Yeah.
Bare Naked. Now I have to put on the big, Beautiful Mind board in the basement, Bare Naked Ladies Canadian Blink-182.
Yeah.
But
who aggravatingly doesn't have that? Friggin' Flogging Molly. I've been trying to basically I need a greatest hits album from them, because there's maybe one or two songs off of every album that I remember from when we were kids. Remember when Niall Hover went to a Flogging Molly concert and came back sans tooth?
Of course I remember that. I mean, all of my punk memories, since we've already dropped the name, are kind of invariably tied to Niall Hover, because we rode the bus together and we would just sing punk songs on the back of the bus.
I love that dude, but he was not a punk. He was probably the preppiest kid in the world, and he really liked punk songs because he could sit around the fire and play them on guitar and not be the guy doing that with Jack Johnson songs.
I want to tell a story, but it's kind of mean. It's not mean so much as it was just one of those moments where I didn't know how to react.
Let me tell you something cool about him first, then, so that there's at least a cool. So we can sandwich this.
Why don't we end it with something cool?
Okay.
Because this is cool too. The fact of the matter is that what I'm about to say is cool. I just had no reaction for it.
Shit, was Niall Hover actually really cool? God damn it.
The story. I mean, he was pretty cool. The thing about him is he's like Troy from High School Musical, which is relevant with Disney Plus listing itself to death on Twitter today.
Yeah, so here's why you're gonna have to listen to a bunch of personal stories from us right now. All right, Disney Plus.
Oh, yeah, that's not why you're gonna have to listen to a bunch of personal stories from me. But Sejan has showed his cards 3 minutes in, which means that if this were a punk song, thanks for listening to the Say Report, will take us home. But no, I mean, it'd be great if I dropped Will in right here. But I have a lot more to say this week.
Surprise.
A lot.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's the Say Report, a show about everything. No, the thing about Niall was we were driving up to URI once because we lived right near each other when we were both in college, and he it was one of these weird confrontation moments that I've had with people. Not really confrontation, confession moments, where he's like, I've had girls come up to me after shows and tell me that I make them wet. And I don't know what to do with that. And I'm like, well, real humble brag there. But I certainly don't know what to do with that information.
Fucking Niall.
But yeah, that's pretty cool. I wish when I sang my songs, that happened.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's exactly the kind of kid he was, though. So, for context about Niall, he was this dude that was a beautiful musician, and he basically got to be that way because he was half deaf. And so we have all sorts of great fucking stories about him being half deaf, like that night in Romeo and Juliet when I accidentally played the church bell sound effect at full blast in the middle of one of his solos for a song that he had written specifically for that show.
Can we not talk about Romeo and Juliet? Because I immediately get squicky.
Because it was in his bad ear. But anyway.
I get so squicky thinking about that show. But continue. I'm sorry. I stomped all over you.
No. So Niall Hover is the dude that, as we were driving through Newport one night, and he would play this game as he was driving called "I Give Up on Driving." So he would.
I know that game well.
Seat, and you'd be in the back seat, and he'd be like, "Nah, I quit," and you'd have to jump over the front seat to grab the steering wheel and be like, "Niall, stop fucking around." So we do this one night, and there's a car in the other lane, and I won't say that we got in real danger of hitting it. We were never that stupid. but that car sure enough pulls a Yui behind us, and you better believe that red and blue lights come on.
Oh, I mean, I know this story well. Don't.
So we get pulled over, and the cop goes, and the cop starts asking him, like, what's going on? What's the deal? And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, officer. I'm deaf in one ear, so my balance is off. That's all that was. And the cop looks at his license, and it lists a hearing impairment on his license. So he just goes, oh, okay. You might want to think about having one of your friends here probably drive this time of night when it's a little dark. It could be dangerous out here. Move along, move along.
Yeah.
But that motherfucker looked a cop in the eye, just stone cold, was just like, oh, I'm sorry. It's because I'm half deaf. And then I swear, he put his hands under his chin and blinked his eyes like a fucking little rascal.
Well, the thing is, I mean, that part at the end, great for the story, probably didn't happen. The thing is, Niall Hover is one of those people who exemplifies it's not a lie if you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was not him in his mind being like, how can I get out of this? 100%. That is what he believed was the reason that happened. He took his hands off the wheel because his balance was off, and he knew that in the past someone would take it up for him. And then face to face with a police officer, all he could do was tell his truth, which was, I'm deaf, and I have a balance issue. I'm sorry.
I didn't say anything not true, officer. Oh, man. Yeah. I miss the days when that was the kind of stupid danger we were all in.
Were you with us when we, I feel like Niall was there, which I did not mean for this to become the Niall report, but it's kind of hard not to have that happen when you're listening to Blink-182 mere seconds before you start recording. But we did drive-by Nerf shootings on URI campus.
Yep. Yes, I believe Niall was indeed there for at least one of those, but yes, I do remember those nights. We would go out to Toys R Us and buy a package of 100 Nerf pellets or whatever the fuck they're called, and because I don't want to call them bullets because that sounds even worse than
darts.
Thank
Nerf
you.
Darts.
Yeah, and then we would just drive around and we would see people just making out in hallways and stuff, and we would just shoot down Oh man.
God.
Yeah, we were assholes.
It was a different time in 2006 is the thesis.
It was. I was actually just talking about this today with a bunch of friends at work because we were talking about that was the year the Wii came out, November 2006. And the world changed. Right? That's weird.
Yeah, it was a big shift in gaming. But more importantly, and what has got me in this mood that had me dreading recording this episode, because I don't know what I'm going to say or what I'm going to reveal over the course of this episode of the Say Report, because I am like a tsunami of emotion.
Oh, I thought you meant we were going into Say Report After Dark again, and I was all for that, but okay.
I don't have any After Dark stories to share, unfortunately. What happened is there's so much contention and issue that I want to grab onto. So what I'm going to start with is tomorrow, Kevin Smith's new film, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, releases and premieres.
For a couple of days, yeah.
No, I don't think it's getting anything
playing
else.
For 2 days in Utah. I don't know about outside of Utah, but
it's playing for 2 days. It's playing on the 15th and the 17th. Mm-hmm. It is a Fathom event, and I don't believe it's going to get a release much bigger than that. It's how they did Red State. It's how they did not Tusk. That actually had a real theatrical run.
No, the one with Johnny Depp as the sausage there. What's the name of it?
Oh, Yoga Hosers. Yoga Hosers. But no, Yoga Hosers didn't get a theatrical run. That was just a Fathom event as well.
What was the other one then?
Tusk.
Oh, Tusk was the one that
Tusk got was the one that got Tusk was the one that got an actual theatrical run.
Yeah, what was the other Fathom event? Sorry, that's
the other Fathom event. It was Red State was one, and then Yoga Hosers, the sausage one, the one that you brought up.
I am gonna slap you. That's why I was bringing it up as the one that got the Fathom event. Yes,
right.
Yes.
That felt like exactly what we were talking about. It wasn't Tusk? It was, and then you said it, but then you asked, but what one had the Fathom event? Threw me off, Siege. You threw me off. but apparently I threw you off. So we're just free falling right now.
This is a night of emotions, all right?
Night of emotions.
So why are you being so emotional about this? This sounds like it's pretty par for the course for him and for what they're doing.
I know, it just kind of bums me out that like his movies don't get real releases anymore. And it's like I have to pay a premium if I want to go see the film tomorrow.
I don't know. I feel like you're definitely going to see Clerks 3 in theaters when that happens.
I would really hope so. The other like big thing, and this is it's not even part of the thing that like enrages my emotions. I just understand that it's a symptom of the emotions that I possess, is the fact that the Weinsteins were kind of his biggest money contributor.
Yeah.
And they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Clerks got its release specifically through the Weinstein... Clerks 2 got its release specifically through the Weinstein Company, which was a hell of a reminder, but we'll get to that whole thing. So I don't know if Clerks 3 would get an actual theatrical run. I certainly hope it would, because
I think any company that ends up backing a Clerks 3 would be stupid to not at least try. Unless it ends up being like a Netflix original, which could totally be a thing that happens in this world, especially 2-3 years from now.
Well, I mean, based on all the marketing that I see, I feel like he's in league with M Legion, that like own a piece of the movies, which I don't understand. It seems like a pyramid scheme to me. I'm like, oh, I'm really a part of this. And then I started doing the research and I'm like, I'm not really a part of this. This seems like
it's
Kickstarter for movies, but a bigger investment from me.
Except the devil's involved.
Yes.
So yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I don't know, man. I think that this is a natural place for him to kind of fall as a dude that is kind of one of the last bastions of like true independent cinema. I'm kind of down with this idea that like maybe he doesn't get major releases for his movies, because that's not what indie film should be. You know, like that part of me is very happy with this turn of events, to be entirely honest.
Right, but if I were going, but I'm still going to the same theater where I would see Rambo: Last Blood, or I would see Joker. Rambo: Last Blood was a much better example. I didn't have a follow-up one that was as good, and I apologize for that. But Joker actually makes sense because AMC has it as part of its Artisan series. Yes. And I'm like, what does that even mean? Because like I understood why Where'd You Go, Bernadette and Blinded by the Light were part of the Artisan series.
Oscar contenders.
Okay, I get that.
That's what they mean.
Oh, I thought it was more like true independent cinema, like not indie, but like
no. We don't have the Oscar nominees yet, but if you want to get a jump on seeing the movies that are probably going to be nominated, this is the list for you. Like that's honestly what it is.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Sejan. I learned something today. Maybe rage is not always bad.
I mean, like, don't hold me to anything true about that. But I mean, like, from what you've named so far and what a little I know about the AMC Artisan series, it seems very much like it's geared towards the crowd of people, specifically out here. There is a level of human that will go to the movies every week if they can think of an excuse that it's not trash.
I understand that. I know those exact types of people. Yeah. But then I also know the little girl who, after we saw Where'd You Go, Bernadette, which is still exceptional, that has not changed, nice. Saying to her mother, I thought it was a comedy. I'm very sorry that we saw that. And I'm like, oh, I thought that movie was pretty funny. It was dark black comedy, but like,
well, right, but it is still humorous, right?
It's still marketed as a comedy. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
you're not dumb for thinking that was going to be funny, because that's what the trailers presented to you.
That's that's the exact same crowd, and this movie would have fallen right into this when I walked out of Burn After Reading with Pat. And Pat Boz and I saw that movie, laughed the entire time, and then realized in a pretty full theater we were the only two laughing the whole time. And I know leaving that theater, people were having that exact same conversation. I'm sorry, I thought it was going to be funny. Those Coen brothers, they get you.
Yeah, that was one of those ones where when I saw that one alone. I'm like, I need to see this movie. Mostly because I like the Ocean's movies, let's be completely honest. It wasn't for the Coen brothers. It's like, oh, George Clooney and Brad Pitt. That's always a rib tickler.
And then they only get one scene together. And it's oh my God. Not going to spoil it. It is honestly one of the greatest, most surprising scenes in cinema history for me.
Yeah. It was worth it. It was, and I enjoyed it. But then, like, because I had seen it alone, I had no group I didn't have like a community. I didn't have a village. So then like 2 years after it came out, when I found people who thought that movie was hilarious, I'm like, oh good. Oh good. I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
Like you saying that is like one of those moments where I'm like, oh good. I wasn't alone.
No, that movie is fucking hilarious. John Malkovich with that axe in the street. Oh my god.
Tilda Swinton. I'm gonna say Tilda Swinton. Like that's where she really got onto my like radar as like, oh, she's not just like crazy.
Shit, gotta go back and watch Burn After Reading after this. Excellent.
It's a good one, and you could kind of make it hollow watching because this is about the horrors that go on every day in our country's capital.
Oh man,
every day.
I just because I'm not going to dwell on it later, I will just mention last night's Hollow watching was the Tiny Toons semi-Halloween episode where they go to meet Dr. Gene Splicer. Fantastic.
I mean, so good that it's what the Sega Genesis game is based on.
Yeah. Buster Bust Loose Gene Splicer is one of the baddies
Buster
in that
Bust
too.
Loose. Oh yeah, he is, isn't he? He's the like 4th level boss.
Yeah, he's only a level boss. He's not.
Yeah,
like a
it's
major
not
one.
like I'm like, oh, I thought you have the game wrong, but no, then I remembered, no, you do fight Gene Splicer as well in that game, and it's awesome. Man, Tiny Toon Adventures, good stuff. But back to rage and back to anger. So like it just bothers me that I'm going to be going to the theater where I'd be doing it, but that my ticket, I've seen it up to like $10 more than a standard ticket.
Okay, see, that's ridiculous. One of the things about going to it out here is and Kevin Smith has been very open about this. He loves this area. He loves this community because this is where he got started. Clerks at Sundance is what got him where he is. So around here, it's like it's like Homeboys Coming Home. Like that's really what it is everybody around here is super excited to go see it, and they're showing it at that Broovies place that I've bragged about on here before, where it's just going to be a regular price movie for them though. They're expecting you to buy a bunch of booze and food while you're there, and they're going to get a fucking huge crowd to do it, so it's going to blow the roof off that place. So they're not raising the price on the ticket. It's just going to be the same as just going to a movie, and I think that's where that Artisan series shit starts to lose me.
Well, but okay, so it's not. This is not part of the Artisan series. This is specifically a Fathom event.
And you were saying Joker was part of the
Joker. Joker was part of Artisan. So like,
still ridiculous.
No, but the combination is that like is the same place where I'd go see Last Blood, which in terms of like space between releases, it kind of slots into that same area for me. But yeah, so first of all, it's not playing in Rhode Island at all. Even with things like the Avon and the cable car, but I think the cable car closed. I would not be surprised if the cable car closed. It was run terribly by all accounts.
Wasn't that the one that was full of couches that like for like years after the Station Night fire, they kept getting fined because they refused to like pull out the extremely flammable couches that were their seating?
Yep. And then they did like historical land, like the way that they got around it was crazy. But it was just, it's one of those things where I never really had a good experience there. I'm just going to be
managed into oblivion.
And I believe that that's gone. So, I mean, the fact that doesn't even exist anymore also speaks to it. But, I used to see Fathom events at the Warwick Showcase or at the Providence Place Showcase. And the fact that they're like, no, we're not showing this movie. Like, that says something to me. That they're like, we're going to opt out of this particular Fathom event. Feels weird. So does the place where I have like started going to Fathom events, which is the Swansea Regal. They're not showing it either. My adopted theater in Connecticut is showing it. Tickets are $17. So it's like, the AMC up in Framingham, Massachusetts. This is fun, right? Me just listing local locations. $15 ticket, which is pretty good, right? That's kind of standard movie fare. Plus, it's one of those eatery ones, but sold out. So it's like, So then my only other option, and this is where I'm probably going to end up going, because I have a strict I don't go to the Lisbon AMC on Tuesdays policy.
Understood.
Because they, like, the cheap movies, and their building is just not equipped to have that many people in it. Like, it is very strange to see it on a Tuesday. Like, I don't go on certain times and dates because the building just straight up isn't equipped for the amount of people who are there.
Yeah, and who needs that stress when you're trying to enjoy yourself? I get it.
Right. So the Regal in Bellingham, which is where I saw Boyhood, the boy movie,
That
Boyhood.
boy movie.
So like, okay, it makes sense on a level. Like I can say, like, I've already seen this type of movie there, but the ticket is $20, which like it feels on a stranger on a secondary level as like, oh, at all these other theaters is 15, but they've added a $5 premium to it. Like I say, it's 17 at the one in Lisbon, but that's because it's 16.90.
Yeah.
And that 90 cents is weird to me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just so I want to see it because by all accounts, it sounds like something that I would be interested in.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like, especially that. But if I'm going to see it, I initially didn't want to see it alone, and Dale had some excitement. But Dale has only ever seen Mallrats. As
wrong with that.
As
right?
like a cognizant human being, the only one that she has seen is Mallrats. Because like there are moments that I remember, and even Mallrats, like I tried to show that to, like we were watching it and she was in the room, and my mother got very mad because of the scene where Willem Black is all, you know what, that guy over there, that's just a guy in a suit about the Easter Bunny. Because she's like, I don't want her whimsy to die. I'm like, it's a movie. Like, she might be 5, but she gets that movies are not always true. And I remember another one, Chasing Amy. We were going to watch Chasing Amy, and because of the whole Mallrats thing, I said no. And then someone said, you can't watch it because there's a lesbian in it. And 5-year-old Dale asked, what's a lesbian? And the response from my friend was, is a girl with short hair. So then when my mom got home, Dale held her hair up so it looked short and said, look, Mom, I'm a lesbian.
I'm sure that Dale loves this story coming out.
I mean, she'll tell that story happily. Probably not happily now that she's seen Chasing Amy, though. Because our intention was to just like kind of marathon these films, and then we'd both be ready to go see Jay and Silent Bob Reboot with all of it fresh in our minds.
Mm-hmm.
So Friday night, we sit down and we watch Clerks, and that movie has not aged well, is what I'm going to lead with.
I don't know. I watched it over the summer because after we saw Kevin Smith, Tess got really interested in seeing some of his stuff, and we watched Clerks. And I will say there's definitely some conversations in it that are a little, I don't know, because the thing is Dante's whole story in that is this idea of him being one that has been raised on this idea of this kind of really toxic masculinity and dealing with this woman that is very feminist in her, like, right. It's kind of third feminism, but it's definitely feminism that's being expressed there.
Yes, no, and I will agree. Like I'll agree that Veronica is a very strong character. It's just it becomes an issue, and it's not an issue that I don't think you or I saw, but it's an issue that Dale saw because she was in film school with a lot of people who, like, Kevin Smith was their reason for being in film school. So these people that I met who, like, Kevin Smith is my god, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't take away from it what apparently you and I took away from it, right? Is that Dante is this shitty character trying to come to terms with, like, what a liberated woman is. God, that sounds fucking terrible. But that's really kind of what his character is.
I mean,
in
that's
a lot
his
of ways.
entire character arc is him coming to terms with that. Yeah.
Right. And, I mean, at the end of it, does he, doesn't he? I don't know. But that's an argument for another day. But I know these guys, and it's just like, oh, they didn't take away the lesson that Siege and I took away from it. They took away the lesson that, like, these are the type of guys I want to be like.
Mm.
And as we continued into Mallrats, that same thing. Like, Brody and T.S. are man children in kind of every sense of the world, and the world rewards them with their girlfriends back, even though they kind of don't really do anything in real world terms that should get them back.
Yeah.
They kind of...
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think what it's really evident is this doesn't forgive the movie at all. I'm just...
Right, no.
Mallrats is a much more marketable film than Clerks is, and I think part of that is that the resolution of Clerks is that Dante and Randall are not good people, but they're trying. right? Like that's key for both of their characters, and that becomes even more evident in Clerks 2 when their relationship evolves and their sense of who they are in the world keeps going. But it's important to note that as characters, Dante and Randall are consistently failing because of their shitty sensibilities. Like they're not succeeding. By the end of Clerks 2, they're still just dudes working at a fucking like fast food place, right? Like,
well, they own the convenience store. That's the resolution of Clerks 2. I watched it today. That's the reason why. I mean, all of this is very fresh in my mind.
But this is after Dante has come to like terms with like being a better person because Rosario Dawson. So to answer your question earlier about do they stay together or does he change? No, not really. Like we know for a fact he doesn't.
Right. And he stays working at the Quick Stop for 10 more years.
Right.
Like he doesn't get better. Yeah.
Right. And then there's Mallrats, where these dudes are just
how
average.
Old do you
90s.
think they are? Before we go any further with that, how old do you think T.S. Quint and Brody Bruce are?
They're supposed to only be like early 20s, right? Because they're talking about high school from just a few years previously.
They're still in college. Like T.S. is still in college, so that means the oldest that they could be is 21.
Yeah.
And Dante and Randall are 22 because that is actually said in Clerks.
Yeah.
So it's just like, for the longest time, I would not believe that those two guys are younger than Dante and Randall, maybe the same age, but they don't. I don't know. It felt so weird watching it through like a more critical lens, as opposed to the high school lens that I watched it through.
There's a reason Mallrats is also considered his weakest film, like to date. It is really considered his weakest film. I love it, but I also can't disagree with that. Part of that is because there's not nearly as much depth to it as there was to Clerks. There's a lot more going on, like slapsticky humor and stuff like that, which again I love, but it's just not the same biting like commentary on 90s like grunge life that Clerks is. I mean, that's the other thing about Clerks is that you really got to keep in mind is it really is contextualized by its time in a way that, you're right, doesn't really work anymore, but you and I completely remember that time. I can totally see somebody like Dale who wasn't around when like Kurt Cobain was still like a thing, right? Like if you don't have that context of that nihilism of the early 90s in you, you're not going to really find what you need in Clerks.
Right. Plus the 37 Dicks scene has just aged super poorly. Like,
still laugh at it. I mean,
that's and I'm not judging you for or anything like that. It's just like, whew, that's hard. That's hard, and it's harder when you consider that a lot of the funding came from the Weinstein brothers.
Well, that's a whole other thing. But like the 37 Dicks thing is very much, this is where you start seeing a lot of like the third wave feminism stuff that's going on in it, where you have straight up scholars that are porn stars that are scholars going on in the world of like academic feminism and things like that. So like that style of feminism, that sexual liberation, and that like openness and vulgarness that's going on there is actually all super progressive for its time. Again, but
for its time is the issue. And that's because that's where I'm like, is because I've already talked about on this show.
I still hear that kind of conversation and vulgarness going on. Like we're not really in fourth wave feminism. Like we're kind of in feminism 3.5. So like, right. I don't know.
Well, I have no issue with Veronica and how she talks during that.
Right.
It is how offended Dante is. It is that. But you're not wrong in talking about he is supposed to represent a specific male ideal in that scene and in that film.
Right.
And I agree with you 100%.
And I think by the end of it, he grows from that moment. I don't think that he is nearly, because I mean, it's seen in his realization that he's actually being an asshole and like goes back to Veronica and like whatever happens to them, he is at least still trying to get over that. So like it's something that he is in him. He recognizes throughout the film is wrong and tries to overcome by the end of it. And now the question is, does he or does he not? Now that's an interesting question, but that's what makes it a good movie, is the fact that question is there.
Well, I mean, it makes it a good movie if you don't see the original where he gets shot.
Well, right. And then Kevin Smith comes in and steals a pack of cigarettes. God.
Yeah. Which I watched at Niall's house, so it's all tied together. Jesus. But yeah, and then you get to Chasing Amy, and it's just that. And it's just a way that I never really viewed it, because suddenly I feel much better. Like, I'm glad that I brought this issue to you specifically, because you and I watched it through the similar lens, right? Knowing the world that was going on around us. It is weirdly a period piece. It's like we talked about with like Back to the Future doesn't work as a remake in like 2021 because the sensibilities of the 80s do not surround 2021.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what that is about.
Right.
In a lot of ways. So it becomes a period piece, but it was never intended as a period piece, though arguably Back to the Future is the worst example of that because all the 50s stuff is kind of period piecey. Yeah. I'm losing the thread, but yeah,
it's a time capsule though.
It's a time capsule.
Definite time capsule.
Yeah, and I think that the same with Clerks and all that. And you know, I have talked about Chasing Amy and what it means to me personally because it was a film that I was watching that was using terminology and referring to things in ways that was very advanced compared to everything that I had heard up to that point in my quick math in my head, like 15 years on the planet.
Yeah.
So like that's why it still means a lot to me, but also from looking back from 2019 and the stuff that goes on in that film, no would be what most people would say about it. Like, it's not powerful. It's not trying to be progressive. It's being diminutive. But that's through 2019 lenses.
It's something that we've talked about before. The idea that as a progressive, you have to come to terms with the fact that at some point you're going to become the evil empire. You're gonna the movement is going to progress to a point where you are suddenly the conservative. That's just going to happen, and it happens with everybody. You know, take it from somebody that's in the middle of like season 4 of a rewatch of Buffy. That show, super upsetting now, where at the time it was super powerful and forward moving. So like the important thing is how the artists that create that kind of work really kind of contend with that, and you have a scale in which people deal with that. You have somebody like a Todd Phillips who 15 years ago was seen as a guy that was really moving comedy forward and really kind of doing something new and different and showing all these different, you know, types of lifestyles, characters, and all this stuff. But now he's gotten to a point where he's just a shitty, grumpy old man. Like, there's no other way to describe his recent attitude about film and comedy and all that nonsense, right? Then you have somebody that's kind of an in-between. You got a Joss Whedon. There's this guy that, like, realizes that he's no longer the progressive type. He's not happy about it, but he recognizes it, which is why he keeps his mouth shut nowadays. He's openly talked about how he realizes he's not the leader anymore and he needs to step back and let others lead. And then you've got somebody like Kevin Smith, who I think is one of the most open dudes in the universe about how he realizes he's had to grow up. His entire career has been learning to grow up, not least of which because he found his wife. He has his daughter now. He's now put himself in a position where he is surrounded by powerful women, and he's come to recognize, like, I need to do something about this. So then I'd be really interested to know if you guys watched Yoga Hosers or not. I'm assuming no.
No. Well, she said she was out after Chasing Amy because in her estimation, she had just watched 6 hours of men being immature, childish children and being rewarded for it. In these films that presented strong female characters who at the end of the day were duped by their actions and the way that they treated the world. And I was kind of floored to hear that. And it's where like the rage came from, not at her, but at the fact that she's not wrong. Like I could really see the moments in those that would cause someone to come to that conclusion. And also in terms of like a lot of the stuff that we were talking about, and this is like, we've had long discussions that I wish that I could present here in just entirety, because we started talking about the incel movement, a thing that we mentioned last week in regards to Ghostbusters Answer the Call. And I feel like, and this is partially inspired by something that Dale said, these guys who are incels are people who might have grown up on a film like Mallrats, right, which is sort of the best example in the fact that it is his weakest film. I don't think either one of us would disagree with that. Mm-hmm. And they grow up with something like Mallrats, and they see these guys who like comic books and play Sega and still live at home with their parents, but they have these beautiful girlfriends who are not just like women in terms of women, but also intelligent and strong female characters. And I think that, so this movie tells me that. And it's a further issue is in that how much faith we put into media in this society and in this country.
Yeah.
Where they believe that, oh, it worked in that film for them. Why am I doing the same thing and I'm not getting the same result?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that a bunch of people who saw that movie and thought that could be the result for them. It's the same thing with like rom-coms and women when those were huge. Like the whole, like, he's just not that into you, or how does she do it? Like those books that came up about why can't I find Mr. Right? Basically, Sex in the City existed as this whole thing about like, well, movies are lying to you. You need to kind of live your life, while also being a show that lied that like this is how you find happiness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I point to my three examples of like what you really need to consider in those moments is how those artists, all of the artists I mentioned, all guilty of being in that position, of being these guys that were in this position that were playing with tropes of the moment in a way that they maybe in some of these cases it's not even that they intended one thing and they're being misread. It's that they didn't even intend to make a point in doing this. It just so happens that a message then gets attributed to it because that's how audiences work, right? And so like the important thing is to look at how those artists of that time have really kind of grown over time, because like the reaction to those and the idea that like here is a trope, the idea of the dopey guy and the hot girl being together and the dopey guy just gets away with it. Well, to be entirely honest, that is the fabric of comedy. Like if you look at any sitcom, any comedy, it's always about a dumpy dude who gets away with it. And a lot of people could accuse and do accuse Seth Rogen of like banking on that. I mean, go watch The Long Shot. Fantastic movie, but guess what the entire point of that movie is? And that's not to forgive it like at all. It's to point to like that's just like
still happening.
That is the tool. That is the tool. What matters is what the artist does with the tool, right? And so, like, where do they go with it? And I think that where you look at a guy like Seth Rogen, who I think would say was very inspired by Kevin Smith, and they're now friends. Like, I think that he would say, like, he sees it's important to use that trope and then grow from it, and you see that in all of his movies. By the end of Seth Rogen comedies, you always have much more complicated real people than you did when you first saw the stereotypes in the first 15 minutes, right? And I think that Kevin Smith has really kind of grown as an artist, as a human, and all of that because of it. So as much as I can look at his movies and see that shit, I can forgive that because I've seen that he's learned from it. Whereas somebody like Todd Phillips, it
works.
Who has so fucking stubborn about learning from the way that the world has grown and what he used to do and what he could be doing, that he has decided to completely shut himself out of the world of comedy and shit all over it, which is ridiculous. Yeah. So I think it's key to me to see that him as an artist has responded in kind to the world changing. And that's what makes those movies work for me, because I can look at them, see the mistakes he made, and I can sit there and be smug about the fact that, all right, this was funny then, because I know that he's grown up now. There's a safety net for me to fall back on.
Right. And I agree. I did a lot of that. Like, well, at the time, funny, it's through this lens. And it also made me think about, Kevin Smith has mentioned millions of times that like John Hughes is a huge influence on him, and whose movies became super problematic in recent years. But John Hughes. So it just makes sense that like that wave of realization would come. And also, you're not wrong. Dale stopping at Chasing Amy, I got it. I understood why she did it. And we talked about it today after I watched Dogma, where I'm like, I understand where you're at, but I feel like you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't continue with his library of films.
Yeah.
Because that is where you see something like growth. Now, does that change the fact that there's still a bunch of homophobic stuff and terrible jokes about that going forward all the way through Clerks 2? No, that unfortunately doesn't change. And even though he puts that great thing in the credits of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, saying that like all of the people who use this are fictional characters and idiots for using language like that, don't do it. how many people honestly stayed for the credits to read that?
And it's very easy to point out the hypocrisy of calling out that language while still using it. I mean,
Right. Well,
yeah, it's for sure. Right. And that's the other thing that we have to recognize is that also these people are humans and not gods. We should not be looking to them as like leaders of our own fate. Like we should be taking matters into our own hands and not letting movies dictate who we are and what we do, but also we all do it.
and Sejin totally stole my wrap-up moment for this whole thing, but he's not wrong. But that's where a lot of I've been in a mood. I've been having a bit of a crisis because my sister mentions these people who worshipped him like a god, right? Idolatry at its finest in terms of Kevin Smith, and watching and thinking of those people because I met a lot of these people. They was roommates with one of them. I'm like, oh, I can see how he gleaned the more negative qualities from these films. Yeah. And it just put me in this state where I'm like, am I that? Am I that person? Because I've always thought of myself as like a unique and special voice in terms of what I believe and what I try to bring to the conversation and to the world. And it just kind of threw me to think that, oh my God, what if really I'm just spouting back this whole freaking belief system, this rhetoric that came from films I saw when I was 15 fucking years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
can I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
Some of it is.
Yeah, I know.
Some of it is, man. I mean, like you can't deny it. The important thing is that what you recognize as that, what you use it for. Like take the ball and fucking run with it, man. Like there's a ton of Kevin Smith stuff that I enveloped into my psyche and myself and my identity. Like I can never deny that. Like my sensibilities in terms of the languages, the language I use, the way I make friends, the life I choose to lead, that has all been informed in some fashion by this dude. And I can't deny that. But what I can do is I can rest easy in the fact that I can also recognize the shit that he has done wrong and not take that part. I'll take the good stuff. Thank you. I'll leave the shit behind.
Right. And damn it, I guess this is growing up. And that's the reason why I wanted to listen to that before this whole thing. Because it's just one of those things, that realization of where your foundation is and what built you as a person is, I think, part of growing up. And again, I've already extolled just how important like my ideas about sexuality and sex in general were influenced by me seeing Chasing Amy during that time in my life where, Devin was blossoming and learning about the world that way. I can't deny that. And I know for a fact that, seeing Dogma treat religion like mythology totally colored how I viewed all religion.
Yep.
And it's why I am the person that I am today in terms of faith and belief and ideals.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with what I'm about to say, but like I often feel like a lot of there's a certain point at which movies should be seen within more context than just watching them. And what I mean by that is like, imagine getting to see Clerks and then like getting to talk to Kevin Smith afterwards about that movie now and what that movie means now and all of that, right? Like imagine being able to contextualize that for somebody like Dale, just to not to keep like harassing her. Like she has legitimate feelings and issues and opinions about this movie that should not be ignored.
I didn't think it was harassment until you said we're harassing her.
I am pointing it out so that it cannot be misconstrued in a conversation about how everything is misconstrued. I want to be clear.
Gotcha.
But imagine being able to show her a movie like Chasing Amy or Clerks, and then be able to have her confront the artist, or at least confront somebody that's in a position to talk about it with her and discuss that, right? Like having the ability to do something like, break down homophobic material in the library of Kevin Smith, and what does that mean now? For a guy that at the time was seen as an ally and should still be seen as an ally, because I feel like he is. I mean, I can't think of anything that he has come out and said or done.
It would blow my mind if he wasn't. It would be like, how everybody lost their collective shit when they found out that Chick-fil-A's profits went towards that.
Yeah, right.
Like,
and so like imagine being able to confront him about that as somebody that like, when did you learn this and that, or how do you feel about this thing that you did, and to be able to discuss that, I think would be super important for an audience nowadays. You know, I can forgive this shit because of who I am and what I've done, and my own, you know, my own prejudices and sensibilities are also helping me, you know, accept things that maybe somebody better than me should, you know, whatever you want to say about that. But like, at the same time, I don't feel like every movie should come with a fucking encyclopedia about it. Like you should be able to just enjoy a movie on its own merits. But it's tough to,
by that same thing, if we're going to say that you can enjoy a movie on its own merits, you also reserve the right to not enjoy a film based on its merits and based on what's presented. Because you shouldn't have to have an encyclopedia or know everything about the person to put it into context.
for sure.
Like, I mean, that's the thing that we talk about a lot on the show in terms of art and what art means.
Yeah.
And you said this thing where, like, the artist probably wasn't thinking about the things that people are discussing years later. And I almost jokingly said, oh, the Joe Kadowski argument. Because he was always upset in, like, these classes about, like, analysis of writing, where he's like, what if he didn't mean any of this stuff? Like, what if they just wrote it to write it? And it's like, well, that's fine, but the problem is scholars have assigned this value, and that's why they're teaching it to us.
I'm going to butcher this term because it's been years since I've talked about it, but early on in theater history, you talk about the term catachresis, I believe is the word. And it is when a scholar, or not just a scholar, when anybody assigns meaning to something that was not there. It's this idea that you got to be really careful about taking your sensibilities of the moment now and assigning it to a moment then. Not that you can't do it, you just got to be careful about it because you have to recognize the context of when it was said. And it becomes a squishy conversation because a lot of people use that as an excuse to do shitty things and say and do shitty things or get past shitty things that maybe they shouldn't be allowed to get past, you know. And let's take an example completely from left field that we haven't talked about yet, but like James Gunn versus somebody like a Shane McGinnis, right? Am I saying that name right? The dude that just got kicked off SNL.
Yeah.
But you have a guy like James Gunn who made some shitty jokes years ago. You have a guy like Shane that made jokes, you know, shitty jokes years ago. And the way that James Gunn reacts to that is those were bad. And I have come out and I have talked to people about how those were bad. And I've really grown up as a person. And he goes through and he does his apology tour. And then this dude, McGinnis, I'm just going to stick with it.
You keep saying it. I don't know. I don't know his name.
But this is the SNL dude that we
all collectively found out about and then got angry at in one weekend.
But part of the reason that we got angry is because he came out and he just said, like, I'm sorry that I offended you. I don't regret what I said. I'm sorry that it was upsetting to you, which is the worst non-apology in the universe. I thought we learned better than that, but apparently not. And so context, right? Like it's key here. Like you have these two dudes that are in the similar situation. Twitter pulls up a bunch of old shit that they've said, but the way that one reacts to it shows us that they have grown up, moved on, and we can all, you know, breathe a sigh of relief that we still enjoy this person's art. Meanwhile, this other dude, we've decided as a world that we're not going to tolerate because of his attitude about it. You know, it's still happening today. It happens every day. We're finding out about things that people have done and said that in the context of the moment when they said them, maybe even then they weren't great, but now they're definitely not. And, you know, we're calling people on their shit, which I don't think is necessarily bad, but it's hard, man.
Yes, it's, again, I can't disagree with that at all. It's just, I don't know. It just put me in a weird mood, like to see that reaction, but then also to be like, but you're not wrong. Everything you said is supported. And you say that, like, to have someone to talk to put it into perspective. In some ways, I feel like that's what we did, and that's why we had such deep conversations about the films, because I'm like, well, you know, Chasing Amy is specifically him trying to get over his relationship with Joey Lauren Adams.
Right.
Like, that's why he wrote it, and, like, all the personal stuff that's within that film. And then I was like, well, that really even makes it worse for me when you consider some of the stuff that he made his ex that he was trying to get over do in the film.
Well, let's be clear. He didn't like hold a gun to her head and put her in that movie.
True,
she was very happy to do that project with him. Like,
they're
still very good friends because of that project.
And that's the discussion that we had. But it's one of those things where, like, I hear that, and in terms of it, it's like, oh, okay, I get that. I've gone through loss, and I've had to deal with it through artistic means. I've done that before. but it's all strange. And I didn't think that rewatching these films would do that. And I also can't think of a film that I've watched at like, let's say 15 years removed from each other and had such a different like take on. Yeah, and I don't know. It made me sad to see Dante so angry with Veronica about that. Like,
You know why I think I'm not so surprised about these feelings though, man, is that I I think I think it's always been kind of obvious that people got the kind of wrong message from his shit. And it's very obvious from seeing the way that people interact with him.
yes.
You know, I don't know if I talked about, but the night that I actually get to go see him earlier this year, where this dude stands up behind is like, I'm a huge fan and Mallrats is my favorite movie, already a bad sign. And then he goes, can you take me to Sundance with you tomorrow? And everybody in the room groans because they're just like because they know that he had gotten this chance at Sundance and that he did this and he did that. This kid is basically just like, let me ride your coattails. And it's just like, that's not the point, man. Like when he tells these stories about what he did and how he got here and how important festivals like Sundance are and how great it is to have that one artist that reaches out to you when nobody else does, like those moments are few and far between, and embrace them. That's the message. The message isn't to demand it from him, but to his fucking credit, he's like, I'll tell you what, I'm shaking hands tomorrow at this particular booth. You can come and sit with me for a couple of hours and see what that's like. And he get in touch with my personal assistant after the show and we'll set you up. Like like he's like, I'm not gonna take you into fucking premieres. I'm not gonna introduce you to celebrities. I'll show you where the fucking work is, motherfucker. Like come along. We're gonna go here and you're gonna meet all of the shitty fans just like you who show up and are like, listen to my demo. Sorry, Pat, but but all these shitty fans that show up and are just like,
remember
like,
that?
Make me.
Remember that? Sorry.
Hey, that's one of the nicest ways I've ever seen anybody approach somebody famous. So I'll,
Yeah, but it was definitely I'm like, oh, this was not what today was going to be for me.
but it's that idea that's always kind of been there. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a cynical asshole, but that's what I expect out of most people when they see this kind of shit, is they're gonna get the wrong message. You've got to work to find the truth sometimes, I guess, in good art. And like, it's unfortunate, but I think that a lot of what we're talking about is honestly what makes his work kind of still important, which I think is key to good art,
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. But I definitely will be the first person to agree with the statement that there are people who watch these and take away the wrong message. I also, in watching all 5 movies, the reason he killed Dante in Clerks was because he didn't know how to end that movie.
Yeah.
I still don't know that he knows how to end a movie. 6 movies later in that
I don't know.
one
Dogma's got a
specific
pretty
universe.
good ending.
Kinda.
Zack and Miri has a great ending.
I hate Zack and Miri. Zack and Miri is where I got off the train.
Really?
Yeah, I fucking hate that movie. Like, I will be the first person to stand up and say, this was when I'm like, and I'm done. Thank you. Of course, I love Jersey Girl, so who the fuck am I? Saw Jersey Girl like 4 times in theaters. Still have a poster, shirt, bumper sticker. Like, I don't know. It was weird. And what else it did, and where the further rage came from, is, I don't know if you remember a message I sent to you earlier in the week. I wanted to complain to you about something I saw in a comic book. And then I'm watching Mallrats, and I'm like, are we just fucking Mallrats? Is that all this podcast is? But I'm still mad about it. I'm still mad about...
Why? What was in the comic book? What happened? You gotta...
Oh, we're still going to talk about it. Don't worry. So House of X is going on, right? Mm-hmm. This huge X-Men, like, oh, we own them again, so we're going to finally start writing comics about them again. Not 100%. The cynical take on what it is, but huge crossover event. What was that?
Trial of Jean Grey was amazing, and that was like 5 years ago. Just pointing that out. But anyway,
keep going.
Trial of Jean Grey, where the Jean Grey from the past gets brought into the future to be put on trial for the Phoenix, and she has not become the Phoenix yet. So the entire thing, crossover with Guardians of the Galaxy, by the way, becomes a huge like story about like, is it fair to put somebody on trial for a crime they're going to commit story, which is a classic sci-fi. Super good.
Sounds like you're in the minority on that report. Pudumts.
That's not a funny joke, but also not true. It's actually
I know. Come on. It was all for the joke. Come on. I had to pudumts myself because I knew how fucking off base it was. But no, it's one of these. It just feels like the reason why there's. I mean, I bought the latest. I bought House of X #6, and it has in the back the reading order and all of the books that are tied into it. And I'm like, man, this is one of the reasons I got out of reading comics. Like, I remember Civil War, and there being just too much stuff, and my wallet being like, no, we're not doing this, Devin. How often do you talk to your wallet? Am I weird for talking to my wallet?
No, my wallet and I have conversations all the time. Usually it's like, feed me.
Right? Yeah. See, so it's the same type of cautionary tale about you and your wallet.
Yeah, I also I don't get too hung up on reading comics in the moment. I will also be honest about that. A lot of this House of X stuff is super interesting to me. I look forward to reading it over the next 10 years.
Right. And I literally just bought one so I could read it because I read something online and I'm like, I'm curious how this was handled and how this whole book is being handled. Interesting. A lot of like weird looks at X-Men characters that I love. But, but the big one and the one that got me like, we need to have a good old fashioned talk about comic books is Moira McTaggart is a mutant now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And she's not just a mutant now. It's one of those, like, she's a mutant, but she's always been a mutant things.
Good old fashioned retcon. All right. What's going on here?
So, Moira McTaggart is essentially the Doctor. That's the easiest way that I can explain it to you in terms of other science fiction that exists.
I've heard it broken down as such. Yeah. So can we like flesh out who this character is and who this character was, and then let's talk about what she has suddenly become.
So Moira McTaggart, as far as I'm concerned, and why it was so strange to me, is the strongest human ally to the mutants in the Marvel continuity. Am I off base with that belief?
No, I mean, I'm trying to remember. Like Rose McGowan was not her. Rose Byrne. Was Rose Byrne her, or was she supposed to be just a facsimile of
Rose
her?
Byrne was Moira McTaggart.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. That was her character name. The only difference being that instead of being a scientist, she was a CIA operative.
Yeah,
but she still was science-minded. Like, there are people who are in intelligence because they're intelligent.
Right. And it's key that she's human throughout that version of the X-Men.
It's key that she's human throughout everything in the X-Men because it's sort of the proof to Charles that acceptance exists.
Mm-hmm.
It's really like him finding Moira McTaggart is what makes Charles Xavier believe harmony is possible, between humans and mutants.
Right.
Where Eric, all he saw was, persecution of humans by humans, and then I'm a minority of a minority, so
right.
My persecution is even greater. Like, the shining difference is that a human accepted me.
Yeah.
I'm Charles Xavier. So making her a mutant, I don't want to say feels like a betrayal, but it's the words that my mind came up with just now.
It pulls the rug out on a lot of past like instances and stories with her. Like it really does. And what's worse is you usually have the excuse to fall back on, well, just because they rebooted this doesn't mean you can't enjoy the original. But when they reboot the character in a way that says, guess what? She's been this all along. You now have to go back and view things in a different light. Like they've taken that again, safety net away from you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, which is not cool. That's the part I don't love.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like when I'm like, oh, Moira McTaggart's a mutant now. You know what? I'm okay with it. Because she's been a human this whole time, and then you know, maybe that's how they're going to eventually explain it in the MCU, is like very, very dormant X gene mutations in people. Right. And I'm like, so interesting. So that's why I read into it. And to find out that, like, honestly, I'm going to say what her power is because I've read it. I've internalized it. At the time of her death, she goes back to being in utero with all of the memories of her life, and thus is able to modify where she was in her own personal timeline and affect things that way. So it's kind of like the butterfly effect with Ashton Kutcher, but she doesn't jump back to where she was. She lives her lifetime again.
And convoluted as fuck to be entirely
convoluted as fuck to make it. The reason why I compare it to the Doctor is she only has a finite number of resurrections, 10 or 11 at most.
Nice.
And if she dies before her 13th birthday, when the X gene becomes active in her, she will die forever. So they give it like that proper world building, like rule set that I'm always a sucker for.
Yeah.
But just, ugh. And then my favorite thing is, and her X gene is completely undetectable. So it's like,
why did this have to be Moira? I'm curious, like, what narratively they're doing that like, why not have this just be a whole new character? Because it sounds like an amazing character set when you talk about it, but to apply it to a character that had such a rich and important character set to begin with, like, yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming at this from, is that, like, Moira McTaggart mutant, I'm fine with it. Mm-hmm. If it's like a new thing. If the stuff that they tried to do to Senator Kelly in the X-Men movie from 2000 was done to her, and now, you know, our greatest human ally is one of us. So what does that mean in terms of worldview, right? Especially knowing what I knew about the House of X series. Yeah. Like, we just lost our greatest human ally. And so I feel like that's also the thing that happened in like the reveal that she's a mutant. And also she's such a high level mutant that she's been pulling the strings like her entire lifetime.
Yeah.
Apparently, like, she's in like her 7th, because one of the things I read about it, I did not read this in a book, is that when she dies, all of reality dies as well.
What? Oh my god.
Because she dies and goes back to utero, so everything that had happened in that timeline up to that point is instantly blinked out of existence.
Why does it feel like every X-Men story is, how can we make this person the most OP mutant ever? And then they top it with the next one. And then they top it again. Like,
yeah,
every freaking story feels like, guess what? This person's actually a god. Well, this one's a super god. Okay, calm down.
Yeah. Well, and that was one of the things, is that, like, so the whole point of this is that they have established a sovereign nation in the Atlantic, and they want it to be like, all mutants can come here. We want to be treated just like any emergent culture. And they're blackmailing humanity, is
Cable
what I read.
First.
What?
I'm just going to say that. Cable did it first. I'm just going to say that.
I know that Cable did it first.
Cable did it first.
You're not wrong in that at all. They've had countries before, but they have their council, the Council of Krakoa, which is the name of the country. And sitting on the council is just Apocalypse. And I'm just like, what is happening? Why is he one of the council members? And even then, they're like, all right, we need to put it to a vote. What are the rules of our country? And he's like, I don't fucking care. I don't care because I'm Apocalypse.
I'm motherfucking Apocalypse.
I don't care. Like, I don't care about humans. I barely care about mutants. I'm inevitable. I'm mutant Thanos. It's just weird. But what brought me into it was that Moira McTaggart is a mutant. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, Moira McTaggart is the strongest mutant ever. And that's how I know the thing, because her sixth iteration was imprisoned so that she could never die because they didn't want to lose reality again. Like Celestials put her in a library prison.
Okay. Wow. So comics are up their own ass as usual. Like we were aware of this. So what part of this is making you upset?
Just I just couldn't believe it, Sejin. I mean,
Yeah.
you expressed exactly what I wanted you to like, exactly what I went through when I read it. You already expressed, so I know that I'm not 100% off base with like why isn't it a new character? Why make it her? Why does every mutant need to be the strongest fucking mutant ever? Remember Onslaught? Remember Onslaught? I remember Onslaught.
Oh, man.
Remember X-Man? X-Man is my favorite I'm the strongest mutant in the world. Combination of Reed Richards, Charles Xavier, and Magneto. Fused together in a what-if storyline. And then it cured the X mutation.
See? Comics up their own ass, man, as usual.
Forever.
But
that's the
gonna
thing.
be
It's
what
just
they
one of those things. Yeah, that seems like a good point to end it. Especially in terms of, talking about Kevin Smith. Some of those fans, they're comic book fans. So what have they learned? There's only one place to live happily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Sejin? I really dominated the topics on this one. Though you brought in Niall, which was really nice.
Just for those keeping score, this week for Hollow Video Game Watch, I've been checking out Extreme Exorcism again, which is just a fucking blast. Did you ever play that? It was like $2 like 2 or 3 years ago on the PS4 store, and it was one of the best buys I ever got.
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
So it's a one screen. You get dropped on the screen, and you have to pick up weapons and shoot the ghost, right? But what happens is then you go through rounds. So the next round, there's now 2 ghosts, and one of the ghosts is a replica of every move you made the last round. So it will jump when you when you jumped. It'll jump when you jumped. It'll slide when you slid, and all this other stuff. And you've got to go after that one, because that one will have the crown. So as long as you're going after the ghost with the crown, you're good. And then like 15 rounds in, you now have 15 ghosts, 14 of which are now doing things that like you had been doing the whole time. So as long as you didn't completely screw yourself, you're good, right? And it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier and sillier and sillier. And the entire thing is pixel art, like fantastic, just goofy little ghost figures and shit. It's so much fun. And it's a blast to just play for like 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, and then walk away. But the other one that I was trying to dive into just to get a little bit deeper is I finally started playing the Swapper. Did you ever check that game out?
No, what is
Man, it's so there's like a Lemmings-esque quality to it, but it opens up with you as a spaceman falling onto an abandoned mining facility planet, and you go into the facility and you find the ability to basically generate a clone of yourself, but you can send the clone like onto the other side of the room. So let's say you come into a room with a cavern and you need to get across the cavern. You send your clone across the cavern, and then you can actually transport your consciousness to the clone, and now suddenly you're across the cavern, right? But it's really dark and really creepy and really weird, not least of which because, as I just mentioned, you've now jumped across the cavern. If you move forward, the clone behind you is also going to move forward and fall into the cavern and die. And so that's just the way of it. That's the way to solve that puzzle. Sorry, you got to get across this room. So that clone's now dead. And you, so like you're going through and you're constantly like cloning yourself, swapping with yourself, and killing yourself. And that's like that's the puzzle mechanics for this whole game. And it gets super weird and super gross and super unfortunate in a lot of ways. And there's like a really good story going on about like what happened at this facility. Like, are you or are you not human? There's that element to it that's also really good. There's some good like creepiness to it. Real good shit.
Cool. Since we're talking Hollow video games, I platinumed Ghostbusters this past week. That game is still amazing. It's a great single player campaign game, and you should come to terms with that because there's a real good chance multiplayer's never coming. I've done some reading about it, and while I want to believe that they're gonna build multiplayer from the ground up for a $30 game, I
Yep.
there's no music during the title cards.
Oh man. All
That's
right.
what I'm gonna say. Like, it looks like the normal title cards you see before a movie. They do those for all the game studios that were involved, and they ain't no sound during them.
Weird.
And
That's
reading
weird.
articles with, like, in interviews with the people saying, like, we wanted to bring back multiplayer, but we found 6 different codes and had no way of knowing which was the one that actually went out. And so as much as I would love to play multiplayer Ghostbusters again, because I was one of those people who liked that style of multiplayer, I'm not holding my breath anymore.
Yeah.
Based on one rumor. I can find one place saying that it's going to happen, and then I just find nothing but evidence supporting that it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I did is I jumped feet first into the world of Saturn emulation.
All right. Okay. So let me wait. Are you playing? What was the night one? Are you playing
Clockwork Knight?
Maybe Clockwork Knight. Are you or Echo the Dolphin? Yeah, yeah. Or I know what you're doing. You're emulating Seaman, aren't you?
Seaman was Dreamcast.
Oh.
So you tried. You swung, you missed, but I respect you for swinging.
The Sega Saturn didn't have a Seaman on it? No,
nope.
It was the Dreamcast?
Seaman was Dreamcast because it came with the microphone that slotted into the VMU slot.
I don't know, man. All I know is I would go over to my cousin's house and kill her Seaman every time.
That's so kind of you.
Not on purpose. I was like 5.
1999, you were definitely not 5.
I was like,
you were 13. Let's build in some time for the game to release and for your cousin to get it. 13 seems like the year where you start killing seamen, though. Let's just be honest about that.
We gotta end the show on that.
I want to see what I'm playing because one of them's a Hollow game. They both kind of are. The reason why I've wanted to emulate Saturn for so long is a game called Three Dirty Dwarves. That I played a demo of at Toys R Us in like 96. So I just wanted to play that. And I tried playing it on a keyboard. Impossible. Because you need the layout. Or to the Sega Saturn controller. A and X just didn't work on it. And these are new. Like Retrobit is doing new Saturn controllers. But the game and like the real Hollow video gaming like mention, Symphony of the Night, a game I try to play every October, has a port on the Sega Saturn.
Yeah.
And everybody says that it's inferior, that it's not as good as the PlayStation version.
Yeah.
Lies. As a scholar of Symphony of the Night, a lie. Because it's awesome.
Cool. That's awesome. That's really cool.
I can't beat it. That's why I'm mad at it.
Yeah.
Because there's a fight against Maria at the middle point of the game. And she's not easy like on the PSP version.
Especially when your A and X buttons don't work.
Well, no, I can do that one on a keyboard. Let's just be honest. But yeah, so if you can play the Symphony of the Night on Sega Saturn, give it a try. It's actually great. It's in Japanese. So you need to be one of those people who knows the game already. Otherwise, or you can read Japanese. That's an option, I suppose. But yeah, 13-year-olds killing seamen, because we should have gone out on that. I fucked us so hard.
Oh, God. Not a sentence that ever needs to be put together.
Yeah, wow, Sejan, tell
Kevin
them
Smith and Fired ending.
Where can they find you?
So yeah, hit me up at Siege versus the World on Twitter. I honestly, right now, if you've got any other Hollow video games or watching opportunities, I really appreciate it. Definitely checking out Curious George this week. So that's
I watched
one
it
of them.
again. It's so good. It's got music and all. It's so good.
Yeah, still trying to figure out if we're going to be able to make it to the theatrical re-release of Aliens, or Alien, I should say. But that's hopefully also going to happen this week. So more on that next week if I can pull it off.
Excellent. And if you want to tell me why I'm wrong about Kevin Smith, you can find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker. And also, I'm going to go see Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. So come back next week to listen to my thoughts and prayers on that one. William, cue the music.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.